So I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
Donald Trump has solidified a second term as president of the United States with a sweeping victory. He's pummeled the blue wall, and he's on track to take every single swing state. Jay Chabria is a political advisor to Vice President-elect J.D. Vance and Managing Director at MAG Global Strategies, and he's here with us again today. Jay, good to see you. Congratulations on your election.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
You know, throughout this campaign, I kept asking you, what about, the jokes about the Puerto Ricans? What about the bad debate performance? What is this going to do to Donald Trump? And you insisted all along it wouldn't. It was all just about the economy and the cost of living. Seems you were right.
Well, I appreciate you saying so. Not every reporter is as gracious as you are on that. But yeah, look, it's at some level, it really was. Look, I was on my way home yesterday. I was in my Uber, in an Uber, and a Senegalese gentleman was driving me. He had just been in the country for about 5 or 6 years. And he overheard me talking to a reporter, and he started talking to me about the election. And he said to me, last time I voted for Biden, and I was wrong. I'm also a truck driver, and we don't make enough on our loads like we did when we were under Trump. That, and I don't want any more war. And he voted for Donald Trump this last election. See, what's happened is it's beyond the coalition that was in 2016 and 2020. It's now a lot of everyday Americans, and whatever nationality they're from, they're kind of for this because they saw their lives better under Donald Trump than they did the last 4 years. And that was a huge impetus for them to go into vote in droves for Donald Trump.
When you look at the numbers, you can see Donald Trump gaining in nearly every single demographic in every single county in every single state. I think the most recent numbers I've seen, Jay, is that with the exception of Washington State and Utah, he grew. Is this a Trump thing or is this a Republican thing? How do you see it?
No, I think this is very much a Trump thing. And look, the Republican Party has been remade in his image in a lot of ways, and we've become the party of the working class. So what the Democrats have a problem. They've got union voters that are leaving their party. They've got men, black men, Hispanic men leaving the party, voting for Donald Trump. He has been able to speak to middle class and working class voters all across this country, whatever race they are, whatever gender they are, and they're voting on those issues. And that's usually what drives elections, and it certainly drove this election this time. And then also we talk about immigration too. Immigration was also another huge driver for it. And Republicans were right on the issue. Donald Trump was right on the issue. Kamala Harris, the Democrats, were wrong on it.
I was at a Trump watch party in Washington, D.C. as part of our coverage that night. And there was a young man there in his 20s, I believe. He was a Cuban immigrant. And he said he was voting for Donald Trump strictly on the issue of immigration because him and his family came to the U.S., he said, the right way, and they want to stop the illegal immigration. And this seems to be a thing that I think surprised a lot of Democrats who thought that because of his tough stance on immigration, it would drive Latino voters away and to them, and the opposite seems to be happening because it was also it's not so much the economy, it's the cost of living issue that is driving.
There's a lot of clutching of pearls in the Democratic Party. Oh my goodness, you said this, but look, the way in which real people talk, this is the way they talk, and it's completely fine. It's the policies that really matter. Look, there's some evidence that Republicans have actually done better amongst Puerto Ricans in this country, even after that so-called terrible comment by a comedian telling a joke. And look, here's another example of where Democrats got it wrong. You remember the cats and dogs story here in Springfield, Ohio. We're not about an hour away from where I live. Republicans actually did better in the county that has Springfield, Clark County, than they did in 2020. This is not an issue that Democrats quite understand, but we were able to highlight the issue of immigration, and really this is how what Americans, everyday Americans, think about it, and it actually benefited Republicans in the long run.
The gender divide that we saw in these votes, Jay, I think there's some instructive things for Canada in the outcome there. In particular, in the way men and younger men are moving to more conservative parties and away from sort of progressive politics. And a lot of it has to do with the way men are talked about, the way men are talked to, and the way they're issued. I mean, what do you see there? Because it is stark how poorly the Democrats are doing with men, particularly working class men right now.
Yeah, look, there's always been a gender gap for Republicans, but it was not as stark as the Democrats have now with men. And it's for a couple different reasons. It's one, what you just articulated. They are talked down to. Men are struggling in this country and kind of around the world, too. but every time you say that you want to do something else, they're called a misogynist, and that's not the way it is. Democrats tried to say that Tim Walz, and Doug Emhoff were the new masculine figures that we should be looking up to. I am telling you right now, men do not look up to Tim Walz or Doug Emhoff as masculine at all, and it's kind of a joke, but it's the way in which the Democratic Party and their elites want men to be, and that's just a mistake. But again, it's about the economy still, even with men and women too, working class men and women. They had the ability to buy groceries under Donald Trump. They didn't under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and at the end of the day, that was one of the biggest issues in this election.
Okay, I don't want to talk about anyone's masculinity or not. I mean, you know, the people vote the way they vote, but I wonder how much of this is also just anti-incumbency, Jay, because since the pandemic, in the post-pandemic elections in advanced economies, UK lost. In the French parliamentary elections, Macron had a setback. Germany's in a bit of crisis right now. Finland, Sweden changing government, Portugal, Japan, and now the United States. There is a frustration with the people who were in charge in countries of similar economic and democratic systems. How much of a factor do you think that played into this?
Well, look, I think it absolutely played a factor in it. So your question there, you cut out there for a second. I'm so sorry. So I missed a little bit of it.
Just about the anti-incumbency, like sort of the advanced economic democracies. The people in power during the COVID are getting obliterated when they go to the polls.
Yeah, look, I actually don't think it was anti-incumbency in this factor. I think it's because the party in power did not respond to the needs of the people. If they had had policies that actually kept inflation in check, if they had actually secure the southern border in a much earlier rather than reversing the Trump policies, I actually think that there was a case to be made for the Biden White House and probably Joe Biden himself. So I don't know that there's anti-incumbency here. I actually think it was literally about the policies they had and the fact they couldn't have the answers for it in the next 4 years.
It was an interesting dynamic in the election, though, in that Donald Trump, as a former president, had a record to run on, but as not being the incumbent president, could also run as a candidate of change. Whereas Kamala Harris, while she represented change at the top of the ticket, was sort of tied to the Biden administration. A lot of Democrats are wondering now, had Biden bowed out after the 2022 midterms and allowed a primary and maybe that process to produce a different candidate, do you think that could have changed the outcome here?
Well, look, I do think that they could have run closer. I think Kamala Harris was an absolutely terrible candidate. Remember, she ran her primary before and she never won a primary, and then she was anointed with a few months to go. So voters need to be out there and test you, and primaries are a very good system for in America because it allows you to be tested. It allows you to have to win. It allows you to have to battle knife fights with the other candidates and see if you can get tested that way. And she didn't have that opportunity because the last time she did, she kind of lost and she fizzled out. So I do think that primary system would have helped Democrats, but I still think that they would have been running against the Joe Biden economy and Joe Biden's porous border. And I think at the end of the day, I think it would have been a lot closer. We would not have swept all the swing states likely if they had picked someone that had gone through that process, but it would have been closer, but we would have still won this race.
So the White House, the popular vote, the Senate, probably the House. And we all know the situation with where the Supreme Court is right now in the United States. There's a lot of people up here in Canada looking at Trump, remembering the uncertainty he caused with NAFTA and trade and other things, and looking at tariffs and mass deportation, and they're worried. How worried do you think people in Canada should be about the consequences of the agenda that the president-elect has said he's going to make his top priorities?
Well, look, I think everyone should be uncomfortable, and I think being uncomfortable is a good thing, too. Look, America has spoken. They are tired of the institutions, and they're tired of the policies that have led them to where it is right now. So there's going to be massive change. I have no doubt about it. I think this Trump White House is actually going to be able to impact a lot more change because they've been there before. They've got great people around them. This was one of the best campaigns I've actually ever seen in my 30 years of doing this, and I think a lot of the same folks will go to the administration, and they will do some great things. So, look, if change is scary, all right, then people should be scared. But I think Canada's a great ally at the end of the day. So I don't think it's going to be like a terrible situation for anybody here. But certainly there's going to be a lot of change coming in the next 4 years. I believe that.
Do you have any insight, just as a final question, on the tariff question? Because this is the thing, the business sector's here, whether Canada is going to be hit with that or be exempt from that. Any insight?
I'm not going to speak for any policy. I'm not a policy guy, so that's not where I come down on the Trump, the Trump White House. But I do know that there are going to be a lot of very strong economic changes that are going to be pro-America.
Okay. Jay Chabria, political advisor to Vice President-elect J.D. Vance and Managing Director at MAG Global Strategies. Thanks for joining us today, sir. Good to talk to you again.
Thanks for having me.